Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I was studying engineering at a state university, which meant my schedule was packed with early morning labs and demanding coursework. I'd chosen the dorm specifically because I thought they'd be quieter than off-campus housing. Boy, was I wrong about that assumption. The girl next door had moved in about 2 weeks after me. From day one, she made it clear that she was there to experience the full college lifestyle. While I was the type who studied until 10, did my skincare routine, and tried to be in bed by 11, she was just getting started when most people were winding down. It started with just weekend nights. The bass would start thumping through our shared wall around midnight, usually some mix of pop hits and rap that she'd blast until 3 or 4 in the morning. At first, I figured it was just move-in week excitement, and things would settle down once classes started. They didn't. Soon, it was Sunday nights, then weeknights, until finally it became a nightly occurrence. The music would start sometime between midnight and 2 in the morning and go until whenever she felt like stopping. The walls in our dorm were paper thin, so every beat felt like it was coming from inside my own room. I tried everything reasonable first. I bought earplugs, but they only muffled the sound. I rearranged my furniture to move my bed as far from the shared wall as possible. I even tried playing white noise, but her music was too loud to cover up. After about 3 weeks of sleep deprivation, I decided to talk to her directly. I knocked on her door one Tuesday around 11 at night, hoping to catch her before the nightly concert began. When she opened the door, I introduced myself as her neighbor and asked if we could talk about the music volume. She seemed friendly enough at first and asked what I meant. I explained that the music was pretty loud and mentioned I had an 8 a.m. chemistry lab the next morning, asking if she could maybe turn it down after 11 on weeknights. Her response was dismissive. She told me it wasn't even that late and said this was college, that I needed to loosen up a little. I tried to explain that I really needed to sleep and that the walls were super thin so I could hear everything, but she just got more defensive, telling me that she paid to live there just like I did. Then she said if I couldn't handle college life, maybe I should have stayed home. She literally shut the door in my face. An hour later, the music started, louder than usual. I tried going through official channels next. I filled out a noise complaint with the resident advisor, but apparently there had to be multiple complaints before they'd take action. I asked some other neighbors if they were bothered by the music, but most of them either weren't home much or had gotten used to it. The breaking point came during midterm week. I had my hardest exam the next morning, organic chemistry, and I've been studying for weeks. I needed at least 6 hours of sleep to function, but at 1:30 in the morning her music was going full blast. I knocked on her door again, this time more desperately. When she answered, I told her I was begging her to help me out because I had a huge exam the next morning. I asked if she could please just turn it down for one night. She rolled her eyes and said it was me again, reminding me that she'd already told me this was college and I needed to deal with it. I tried one more time, explaining that I wasn't asking her to stop completely, just to lower the volume a little bit. That's when she got really nasty. She told me that since I kept bothering her about it, she had an idea. She went back inside and actually turned the music up even louder. I could hear her laughing about it through the door. I went back to my room and stared at the ceiling until 4 in the morning, listening to the same playlist on repeat. My exam didn't go well. I was exhausted, couldn't concentrate, and probably dropped a letter grade because of one night of lost sleep. That afternoon, after I'd gotten back from my disaster of an exam, I sat in my room thinking about the situation. I tried being nice, I tried official channels, and nothing had worked. She clearly didn't respect other people or care about how her actions affected anyone else. Then I remembered something from one of our earlier hallway encounters. She'd mentioned that she was taking all afternoon classes because she was definitely not a morning person. She usually rolled out of bed around noon, sometimes later. I realized I had a secret weapon, my Bluetooth speaker, and a complete lack of shame at this point. The next morning I set my alarm for 6:30. Right when the dorm was at its quietest, When everyone was either still asleep or getting ready in hushed tones, I placed my speaker directly against our shared wall. I'd spent the previous evening curating the most obnoxious playlist I could imagine. Bubblegum pop from the early 2000s, boy bands, the kind of music that gets stuck in your head for days. I started with some classic early 2000s pop at a volume that matched what she'd been subjecting me to. By 7 a.m., I could hear movement in her room. Around 7:15 there was angry pounding on my door. When I opened it, she was standing there furious, demanding to know what I was doing. I told her good morning and said I was just listening to some music, asking if she didn't think it was a great way to start the day. She yelled that it was 7 in the morning and people were trying to sleep. I acted confused and told her that was weird, because I thought she'd told me that loud music was just part of college life. I reminded her that she'd said I needed to relax and deal with it. She tried to argue that this was different because it was morning, but I just smiled and told her I paid to live there just like she did. Then I wished her a wonderful day and closed the door. Day 2 brought more pounding, but this time she sounded less angry and more tired. She asked me to please stop the music because she was trying to sleep. I told her I'd consider it if she could keep her music down after 11 p.m. She said that was completely different and stomped back to her room. Day 3 was when things got interesting. She knocked much more politely this time and actually asked if we could make some kind of deal. She looked exhausted and admitted that the morning music was really affecting her sleep schedule. I told her I completely understood how frustrating it was to lose sleep because of the neighbor's music choices. When she tried to say it wasn't the same situation, I just shrugged and reminded her of her own words about college life and dealing with it. Then I mentioned that I had another early chemistry lab the next day, so I probably need to get up even earlier to study. By day 5, she was practically begging. She showed up at my door worn out and asked what it would take for me to stop the morning concerts. I pretended to think about it for a moment, then told her that if she could commit to keeping her music at a reasonable volume after 11 p.m., especially on weeknights, I'd be happy to let her sleep in. She agreed immediately. For the next 2 days, I kept up the morning routine just to make sure she was serious about the deal. True to her word, her late-night music sessions either stopped entirely or became quiet enough that I couldn't hear them through the wall. On day 7, I slept in until 9 a.m. The silence was absolutely golden. She never acknowledged that she'd learned anything or admitted she'd been wrong, but she kept her end of the bargain for the rest of the semester. I'm majoring in computer science and work part-time at a local tech startup to help pay for rent and expenses. The apartment hunting process was brutal last year. Decent places near campus are expensive and hard to find. When I finally found this 3-bedroom place with reasonable rent, I jumped on it. My roommates moved in around the same time and we've managed to create a pretty good living situation. One of my roommates is Muslim and comes from a very traditional conservative family. She ended up in our apartment after having issues at her previous all-female housing situation. From what I understand, there was some kind of conflict with another girl that made her living situation really uncomfortable, so she had to find a new place quickly. Our apartment was basically her last resort since most other places were already full or too expensive. Yesterday, she came to me and my other roommate with a request that caught me completely off guard. She asked if she could talk to us about something important. When we said sure, she explained that her mom was visiting this weekend and she needed to ask us a huge favor. My other roommate asked what kind of favor she meant. She went on to explain that her mom was very religious and conservative and didn't know she lived with a male roommate. She said if her mom found out it would cause major problems in her family. I asked her what she was thinking we could do about it. That's when she dropped the bomb. She needed me to leave the apartment completely for the day her mom was visiting. She wanted me to be out the whole day and even find somewhere else to sleep that night. I was shocked. I told her I wasn't really comfortable with that because I had a massive programming assignment due that week and I worked best from home, where I have all my equipment set up properly. I also pointed out that I pay equal rent just like everyone else. She insisted that I didn't understand the situation. She explained that if her mom found out a guy lived there, she would freak out and make her move back home, causing huge drama in her family. I tried to be reasonable and suggested a compromise. I offered to stay in my room the whole day without coming out at all, and I'd be completely quiet. I even suggested she could bring me food so I wouldn't have to leave my room, but she wasn't having it. She said that wouldn't work because her mom might hear me or something, and she needed her mom to think this was an all-female apartment. I pointed out the practical problems with her plan. What if I needed to use the bathroom? What if her mom wanted to see the whole apartment? I told her she'd just have to figure it out because this was really important to her. My other roommate tried to mediate by suggesting we could work something out that would work for everyone, but my Muslim roommate was firm. She said there was no other way and I needed to be completely gone. I told her I understood her cultural situation, but it wasn't fair to ask me to completely leave my own home, especially when I had work to do, and I'd tried to offer a compromise. She got defensive and accused me of ruining things for her and her family. I explained that wasn't what I was doing. I was just pointing out that I had rights as a tenant too. She walked off after that, clearly angry. Since then, she's been giving me the cold shoulder and barely speaking to me. She also vented to our other roommate who's trying to stay neutral but clearly feels caught in the middle. Later, my other roommate told me that my Muslim roommate was really upset about the situation. I said that was obvious but asked what I was supposed to do, just pack up and leave my own place. My other roommate admitted she could see both sides. She said it was tough for our Muslim roommate with her family situation, but it was also my home. I agreed, pointing out that I pay rent there just like she does. The situation got worse over the next few days. My Muslim roommate started being passive-aggressive, leaving notes around the apartment about consideration and respect for others. She'd make loud phone calls in what sounded like Arabic that I couldn't understand but felt were probably about me. She even started eating my food from the fridge without asking, which she'd never done before. When I confronted her about the food, she just shrugged and said that since I wasn't being considerate about her family situation, why should she be considerate about my food? I told her those were completely different things, and that taking my food without asking was just theft. She replied that I was stealing her peace of mind about her family visit. I told her that didn't make any sense. The week leading up to her mom's visit was tense. She kept bringing up the topic, trying different angles to convince me to leave. She offered to pay for my hotel room, but I explained it wasn't about money. I had work to do and worked best at home. Then she promised it would never happen again, but I asked how she could promise that since her mom might want to visit again. She called me selfish about the whole thing. I told her she was being entitled and couldn't just kick out a roommate whenever it was convenient for her. Finally, the day before her mom's visit, she played what I guess she thought was her ace card. She told me that if I wouldn't leave, she was going to tell her mom there was a male roommate and blame me when her mom made her move out. I asked if she was really going to blame me for her decision to live in a mixed-gender apartment. She said I could fix the whole thing by just leaving for one day. I pointed out that she could have thought about this before moving in with male roommates. She got defensive and said she didn't have a choice because her old place was horrible. I asked how that was my problem. That's when my other roommate stepped in with some information that changed everything. She said she needed to tell me something important. My Muslim roommate actually did have other options when she was apartment hunting. There were 2 all-female places that had offered her rooms, but she chose our place because it was cheaper and closer to campus. I was stunned. I asked if this was really true. My other roommate nodded and said she'd been there when my Muslim roommate was making her decision. She remembered her saying the all-female places were more expensive and farther from her classes. I turned to my Muslim roommate and asked why she hadn't mentioned this before. She got flustered and said those places weren't as nice and the commute would have been terrible. I pointed out that she'd made a choice to prioritize money and convenience over her family's religious concerns. And now, she was trying to make that my problem. She started yelling that I was being insensitive to her culture and that I should respect her family's beliefs. I told her I did respect her beliefs, but that didn't mean I had to give up my rights as a tenant because of choices she made. My other roommate suggested we all calm down and try to work something out. But my Muslim roommate was beyond reasoning at this point. She said if I didn't leave, she would make sure her mom knew exactly who was preventing her from having a peaceful visit. The next morning, her mom arrived. I was in my room working on my assignment when I heard them talking in the living room. Everything seemed fine at first, but then I heard raised voices and what sounded like an argument in Arabic. About an hour later, my Muslim roommate knocked on my door. When I opened it, she looked upset and embarrassed. She explained that her mom had asked to see the whole apartment and noticed that one of the bedrooms clearly belonged to a man. She'd seen my clothes and computer equipment. Her mom had confronted her about living with a male roommate. My Muslim roommate had tried to lie and say I was just a friend who was staying over temporarily, but her mom wasn't buying it. The mom had found my name on some mail and realized I was a permanent resident. My Muslim roommate told me that her mom was furious and threatening to cut off financial support for her education if she didn't move out immediately. She asked if I was happy now that I'd ruined everything for her. I told her I was sorry she was having family problems, but this wasn't my fault. She'd chosen to live in a mixed-gender apartment, knowing her family's beliefs, and then tried to force me out of my own home to cover up her choices. I pointed out that lying to her mom had just made things worse. She started crying and said I didn't understand how hard it was to balance her family's expectations with living her own life. I told her I did understand it was difficult, but that didn't give her the right to kick me out whenever it was convenient. My other roommate came over to see what the commotion was about. She suggested that maybe my Muslim roommate should have been honest with her family from the beginning, instead of creating this whole mess. In the end, my Muslim roommate's mom left early, and they had a big fight before she went. My Muslim roommate spent the rest of the weekend sulking and making passive-aggressive comments about how some people don't care about others' family relationships. The following week, she started looking for a new place to live. She told our other roommate that she couldn't stay somewhere where she wasn't supported during family crises. My other roommate pointed out that asking someone to leave their own home wasn't exactly asking for support, it was asking for someone to give up their rights. Eventually, my Muslim roommate found an all-female apartment and moved out at the end of the month. Before she left, she told me that I'd made her life much harder and that she hoped I was satisfied with the outcome. I told her I was sorry things didn't work out, but I stood by my decision. I explained that paying rent gives you certain rights, and one of those rights is not being kicked out of your own home because someone else made choices they didn't want to explain to their family. For 8 years, I've been a safety inspector at a nuclear power plant about 50 miles outside the city. My job involves checking radiation levels, monitoring equipment, and making sure all safety protocols are followed. The plant has strict procedures for everything. We wear dosimeter badges that track our radiation exposure, go through decontamination procedures every time we leave certain areas, and get regular health checkups. The company takes safety seriously because they have to. One small mistake could shut us down permanently. Last Tuesday, I finished my shift and decided to stop by the grocery store on my way home. I was still wearing my work clothes, just regular khakis, and a polo shirt with a company logo. Nothing special, nothing that screamed nuclear worker to most people. The store was busy that evening and I grabbed a cart and picked up some essentials before heading to the checkout. There were only 2 lanes open and both had long lines. I chose the shorter one and settled in to wait. I was checking my phone when someone tapped me on the shoulder. I turned around to see a middle-aged woman with an aggressive expression. She told me she needed to get in front of me. When I asked what she meant, she explained that she needed to cut in line because she was in a hurry. I looked at her cart, which was overflowing with groceries while mine had maybe 10 items. I told her the line started back there and that I had been waiting for 10 minutes. She insisted she didn't have time because she had 3 kids in the car getting restless. I said I understood, but everyone was waiting their turn and the line moved pretty fast. She stepped closer, invading my personal space. She asked if I knew who she was, claiming to be a very important person in the community. She demanded I let her go first. I told her I wasn't trying to be difficult, but I wouldn't let her cut in line. That's when she snapped. She looked at my shirt, saw the company logo, and something clicked in her twisted mind. She suddenly started yelling for everyone to get away from me because I worked at the nuclear plant. A few people nearby turned to look, but most ignored her initial outburst. Then she escalated, screaming that I was contaminated with radiation and would kill everyone. Now she had everyone's attention, as her voice got louder and more hysterical. She pointed at me dramatically, claiming I was covered in nuclear material and deadly contagious. She yelled that everyone needed to evacuate immediately. I tried to explain that's not how radiation works and that I was perfectly safe. But Karen was on a roll now, telling people I had admitted to working with nuclear waste and that we'd all die of cancer because of me. People started backing away. I could see the fear in their eyes. A mother grabbed her young daughter and rushed toward the exit. I pleaded with everyone to stay calm, explaining that this woman was lying and I wasn't dangerous. But she kept screaming, telling people not to listen to me because I was trying to cover it up. She demanded someone call the police and fire department, claiming we needed hazmat teams. The panic spread like wildfire. Within minutes, half the store had cleared out. The cashier stepped back from her register. Even the security guard seemed unsure of what to do. Karen kept screaming about contamination and radiation poisoning. She claimed I was glowing, that my hair was falling out, that I had lesions on my skin. None of it was true, but people were too scared to think rationally. Someone did call the police. Within 15 minutes, 3 squad cars arrived, followed by a fire truck and an ambulance. The officers approached me cautiously, like I might explode at any moment. One officer told me I needed to step outside slowly. I explained this was all a misunderstanding and that the woman had made false claims because I wouldn't let her cut in line. He said they still needed to verify that and asked me to cooperate. They set up a perimeter around me in the parking lot. Someone had called the county's emergency management office, and they dispatched a team with radiation detection equipment. I stood there for 2 hours while they ran tests on me, my car, and even my groceries. Every single test came back negative, 0 radiation above normal background levels. The lead technician spoke to the police, confirming that I was completely clean with no radioactive contamination whatsoever. He said whoever reported this was either mistaken or lying. By then, Karen had slipped away in the chaos, but the store's security cameras had captured everything. The police reviewed the footage and clearly saw her face when she started her false accusations. One officer told me they had her license plate from the parking lot cameras and would be paying her a visit that night. The store manager apologized and offered me a gift card. The other customers who had witnessed everything looked embarrassed. Some even came up to apologize for believing Karen's lies. That night, the police arrested Karen at her house. She was charged with filing a false report, causing public panic, and disorderly conduct. The district attorney added charges for making terrorist threats because her claims about nuclear contamination could have been considered an attack scenario. During the investigation, they discovered this wasn't her first offense. She had a history of causing scenes in public places when things didn't go her way. She had been banned from 3 different stores for similar behavior. The story made it into the local newspaper the next day under the headline "Woman Arrested for False Nuclear Contamination Claims." My company's public relations team issued a statement explaining that all employees follow strict safety protocols and pose no danger to the public. Karen pled guilty to avoid jail time but had to pay hefty fines and do community service. She also had to attend anger management classes. The judge made it clear that her behavior was completely unacceptable and could have caused serious harm to public safety. A few weeks later, I ran into the store manager at a coffee shop. He told me that Karen had been permanently banned from all stores in their chain. He also mentioned that several customers who had fled that day came back to apologize once they learned the truth. Karen's lies could have caused a real emergency response that might have prevented responders from handling actual emergencies. Her selfishness and entitlement nearly created a disaster, all because she couldn't wait in line like everyone else. My apartment complex has multiple units with a shared parking area surrounded by hedges and small garden areas. I chose this place because it looked clean and well kept. My apartment faces the parking area, so I can see most of what goes on from my living room window. Most neighbors are decent people who keep to themselves and take care of the common areas. What I witnessed one Tuesday evening really got under my skin. I was making dinner when I heard a car door slam outside. I looked out the window and saw this woman getting out of her silver sedan. She opened her passenger door, grabbed what looked like a fast food bag and some drink cups, and just tossed it all straight into our hedge, not toward a trash can that was maybe 20 feet away, right into the bushes where we all have to look at it every day. This wasn't an accident or the wind blowing trash around. She deliberately threw her garbage into our shared garden space and then walked away, like nothing happened. I waited until she was gone, then went downstairs to see what she'd dumped. It was exactly what I thought: a greasy burger wrapper, an empty soda cup, and some napkins. All of it just sitting there in the hedge, making our building look trashy. I picked it all up and decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she'd realize someone saw her and be embarrassed enough to use proper trash disposal next time. So I put all her garbage on her windshield and lifted her wipers to hold it in place. I figured she'd get the message. The next morning when I left for work, her car was gone, but guess what? It was scattered all over her parking spot. Yep, the same trash. She'd just brushed it off her windshield and left it there for someone else to deal with. I was pretty annoyed at this point, but I picked it up again and took it inside with me. I wasn't going to let her turn our parking area into her personal dumpster. A few days passed and I saw her car parked in the same spot again. I decided to ask my dad for advice. My father has this reputation in our family for being really creative when it comes to getting back at people who act badly. He's not destructive or anything, but he's got this knack for making inconsiderate people face payback for their actions. I called him up and explained the whole situation. I told him how she threw trash in the garden area, how I tried to politely return it, and how she just threw it on the ground again. My dad listened to everything and then asked if I wanted to send a message without damaging anything. I said that was exactly what I needed because I didn't want to be the bad guy, but I also couldn't just let her treat our building like her personal trash can. That's when my dad came up with his brilliant idea. He told me about plastic zip ties, the big heavy-duty ones. He explained that I should lift both windshield wipers up and zip tie them together at the top, pulling it as tight as possible. He said it wouldn't damage anything, but she'd need scissors or a knife to get them apart. I had to admit, it was pretty clever. Annoying enough to make a point, but not actually destructive. I realized she probably lived in the building, so she'd have to go all the way back upstairs to get something to cut it off. My dad agreed and pointed out that if she was trying to get to work, she'd be late dealing with it. He said sometimes people need a little inconvenience to remember their manners. So that's exactly what I did. I got some heavy-duty zip ties from the hardware store and waited for my chance. When I saw her car there again the next weekend, I went down with the ties and her original trash that I'd been keeping. I lifted both wipers, threaded the zip tie through them, and pulled it as tight as I could. Those things are basically impossible to break once they're tightened down. Then I put all her trash back on her windshield and left a note. The note was straightforward. I wrote that this was the trash she threw in our garden area twice, asked her to please use the trash cans provided, and warned that if I found her garbage in our landscaping again, the next payback wouldn't be this harmless. I went back upstairs and waited by my window. About 2 hours later, I heard someone yelling in the parking lot. I looked down and saw the same woman standing next to her car, clearly frustrated. She was pulling at the wipers, trying to force them down, but the zip tie was holding strong. She looked around like she was hoping someone would help her, but the parking lot was empty. After about 10 minutes of struggling, she gave up and walked toward the building entrance. She had to go all the way back to her apartment to get scissors or a knife. The whole time her trash was sitting right there on her windshield where she couldn't ignore it. She came back down about 15 minutes later with what looked like a pair of scissors. It took her another few minutes to cut through the zip tie because those things are really tough. Once she got her wipers free, she grabbed the trash off her windshield and my note. I watched her read it, and even from my window I could see she was angry. Instead of throwing the trash on the ground again, she actually walked over to the trash can and threw it away properly. She got in her car and drove off, probably late for wherever she was going. I never saw her litter in our garden area again. In fact, I noticed she started parking in a different spot entirely, probably trying to avoid whoever had zip-tied her wipers. I kept the rest of those zip ties just in case, but I never needed to use them on her again. A few weeks later, I was telling this story to some friends who were having their own parking problems. Someone kept using their reserved spot even though it was clearly marked. I shared my dad's zip tie trick with them, and they said they'd definitely try it if the problem continued. I had just turned 18 and was finally old enough to handle my own money without my parents breathing down my neck. I've been wanting to get into doing lashes for a while now, watching YouTube tutorials and dreaming of having perfect eyelashes. My part-time job at the local coffee shop didn't pay much, but I'd saved up enough to buy a decent lash extension kit. I was scrolling through Facebook Marketplace when I found what looked like the perfect deal. A woman was selling a professional lash kit for $20, which was way cheaper than buying it new from a beauty supply store. Her profile looked legit too. She had a business page for beauty services with her real name, which was pretty unique. The page wasn't super active, but it had been around for years, which made me feel better about the whole thing. I messaged her about the kit, and she seemed nice enough. She told me she had just bought it for a beauty class but ended up missing the class, so now she was trying to get some money back by selling it. I asked her if the kit was completely brand new, because I wanted to make sure everything was unused. She assured me that it was absolutely brand new and that she had never even opened most of the packages. I asked her 3 more times just to be sure, because $20 was still a lot of money for me at the time. Each time she swore up and down that everything was completely new and unused. We arranged to meet at the mall the next day. I was running a bunch of errands for my mom, so my hands were full of shopping bags when I got there. The woman seemed friendly enough when we met, middle-aged, normal-looking, nothing that screamed scammer to me. She handed me the kit in a plastic bag and I handed over my $20. Since my hands were so full and she seemed trustworthy, I didn't check the contents right there. Big mistake. When I got home and finally opened the bag, what I saw shocked me. Some of the lash strips were clearly used and dirty. There were tweezers that had dried glue on them. Half the items that were supposed to be in the kit were missing entirely. I was shocked, but more than that, I was insulted. If you're going to scam someone, at least put some effort into it. Clean the dirty tools, make it look somewhat new. This was just lazy and sloppy. At first, I told myself to just let it go. It was only $20, right? But the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. It wasn't about the money, it was about the principle. She had looked me in the eye and lied to me multiple times. She could have sold this as a used kit for maybe $10 and been honest about it, but instead she chose to be a complete sleazebag. I went back to her business page and started digging. I'm really good at finding information online, maybe too good. It's not something I'm proud of, but when someone wrongs me, I tend to go down rabbit holes. I found her personal profile and saved it before doing anything else. I messaged her business page with photos of all the dirty and missing items. I told her that I had bought the lash kit from her yesterday, and when I got home I found that many items were clearly used and dirty, and several pieces were missing entirely. I said I was hoping this was just a mistake and we could work this out. Her response made my blood boil. She simply told me that the kit was new without any explanation. That was it. No acknowledgement of the photos I sent, no apology, nothing. Then she blocked me immediately. Now I was really mad. The gloves were off. I spent the next few hours doing what I do best, digging up information. Starting from her personal profile that I'd saved, I found everything. Her husband's profile, her kids' profiles, her relatives' profiles. I even discovered some interesting family drama. It looked like her husband had a kid from his previous marriage who had cut contact with the family. Based on the timeline of when his kids with the scammer were born versus when he got divorced from his first wife, I had a pretty good idea why that kid wanted nothing to do with them. The next day, I started my revenge campaign. I took screenshots of our entire conversation and posted them in the comments of her closest relatives' posts. I asked if the scammer was their family member and explained that she had scammed me out of $20 selling dirty, used beauty products as new. I asked if these were the family values they had raised her with. I wanted her to know I wasn't messing around. Then I messaged her personal profile directly, greeting her and asking if she remembered me, the girl she had scammed yesterday. I laid it all out for her. I told her that when someone who claimed to be a professional cosmetologist, she should know better than to sell dirty tools that go near people's eyes. That kind of thing can cause serious infections. I told her that I have found all 5 of her Facebook profiles, her 3 Instagram accounts, her and her husband's full names and identification numbers, their phone numbers, car information, license plate number, tax identification numbers, their workplaces, and the names of all their close relatives. I gave her 2 choices. She could return my $20 or I could post all of this information on every Facebook business group she used for selling stuff. I also threatened to make sure her husband's ex-wife and his estranged kid knew exactly what kind of people they really were. Within minutes, my phone was ringing. She was calling me, sounding panicked and nervous, still trying to deny that she had scammed me. She begged me to meet her the next day so we could work things out. Her husband started sending me angry voice messages, threatening to sue me. He said I better stop harassing his wife or he was calling his lawyer and that they would sue me for harassment. I told him to go ahead and sue me over $20 because I was sure that would go great for him. I agreed to meet her the next day, same mall, same spot. This time I made sure to get there early and positioned myself where I could see her coming. She showed up 15 minutes late, which already annoyed me. She brought back up too some angry teenage girl who I figured was probably her niece or something, who kept staring at me like I was the villain here. They also brought this huge, muscular guy who I assumed was supposed to intimidate me. But the funny thing was, the big guy turned out to be the nicest person there. While the scammer and the teenager were being hostile, he was actually friendly and seemed embarrassed by the whole situation. He suggested that we just figure things out and move on. The scammer reluctantly handed me my $20 back, still complaining about how the kit was new and I was being unreasonable. She said she couldn't believe I had gone this far over $20 and called me crazy. I told her I couldn't believe she thought she could scam people and get away with it. I suggested that maybe next time she shouldn't lie to customers and sell dirty products. I took my money, pulled out my phone, and deleted all the comments I had posted on her relatives' pages right there in front of her. Then I blocked all 5 of her Facebook profiles and walked away. When I was leaving, I heard the big guy talking to her, suggesting that maybe she just shouldn't sell stuff online anymore if she couldn't do it honestly. The teenager was still staring at me, but honestly, I felt great. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.